Hello, chemists. Michelle Glass here, and thank you for joining me for another uh, one of our Chapter 2 lecture videos. The topic here is metabolism, which is something you've probably thought of before, right? You think about like how much food you eat, and then maybe how many calories you burn, and kind of in the context of like gaining weight or losing weight, right? And that's true, that's definitely part of it, but this is more of a broad idea than just this idea of the calories you eat and the calories that you burn. Metabolism here is talking about all of the chemical reactions that take place in the body. And notice I'm using an abbreviation, RXN, as a shorthand for reaction. So you'll see me use that throughout. When we talk about all of the chemical reactions in the body as metabolism, we can then narrow it down into categories. So we have anabolism, which is synthesis or making reactions. And then we have catabolism, which is the breaking down or decomposition reactions. Now, these go hand in hand, obviously. So you eat food, and all of the processes starting in the mouth, continuing in the stomach and small intestine, is to break down or catabolize that food into nutrients that your cells can use. And those ingredients, those nutrients, are put into the bloodstream and then taken around your body to your tissues. And then your tissues use those components, use those nutrients in order to build new molecules, whatever molecules your cell needs, right? So that's what we're talking about here. We also need to talk a little bit about energy. Energy is defined as the ability to perform work. And you've studied this before, probably in middle school and high school. We have what we call kinetic energy, which is the energy of motion. And then we have what's called potential energy, which is stored energy. Now, for us in our bodies, that potential energy is stored often in chemical bonds. So, very often we have chemical reactions that break chemical bonds, releasing that kinetic energy to do work in the body. We can also talk about reactions in terms of their energy need. So, we have reactions that can be classified as either endergonic. Endergonic reactions are going to absorb or use energy. Or we have exergonic reactions, and these are going to be reactions that actually release energy. Now, if you were to feel these, an endergonic reaction would feel cold, and an exergonic reaction would feel hot with that release. So exergonic reactions, we feel this and see this very easily when you move your body and you're increasing your skeletal muscle movement. You're also conducting exergonic reactions in order to release energy. And so you're generating heat, right? When you burn wood, you're breaking down and releasing the stored energy in that wood. And so you're releasing energy that's exergonic. You see that energy in the form of light and you feel it in the form of heat. Hot hands are a product that's using an exergonic reaction to generate heat. So you can be camping in the woods and keeping your hands warm. Endergonic reactions would feel cold. We don't maybe have as many great examples to give right here, things from everyday life, but if you've ever used like an automatic cold compress where you have a chemical reaction that's generating cold, just kind of like the opposite of a hot hand. That would be an example of an endergonic reaction. Let's talk also here about what's called activation energy. Ooh, y'all, I had a mad sneeze come on there, and I hope I paused everything in time. So if you saw me act crazy, that's what was going on. We were talking right there as the sneeze was hitting me. We were talking about activation energy. And here we can talk about this as the energy required for a reaction to occur. We're going to talk more about this in just a few minutes when we look at enzymes. Before we do that, let's look at how we write and talk about reactions. So we use this sort of equation format, and we also always, on the left-hand side, write our reactants, left hand of the arrow, and then we always put our product on the right-hand side. Now here, because we are bringing A and B together in order to make AB, this would be an example of an anabolic reaction. If I added energy here on this side as part of a product, so if in this reaction we also release energy, then that would make it exergonic. Okay, I can just do a little modifying here. I can make this, put the energy as a reactant, and now I have an endergonic reaction. And then I can change the direction of my arrow. So if I draw my arrow the other way, now I see that I have that would change all of this, right? So let me do that too. Because I've moved my arrow. Let me keep this here. Let me actually just rewrite the equation. So now let's go A, B into its components A plus B. So when I've written the reaction like this would look like a catabolic reaction. We could do those same things playing around with writing energy as either a reactant or a product, and that would help us to see whether it was endergonic or exergonic. Next, we're going to look at that enzyme and its significance in what we call energy of activation. And we're going to do that on this kind of graphical representation. So take a minute for yourself. On the left-hand side, you're writing energy, which is going up. And then on the other side, it's the progress of the reaction. So kind of looking at like time in a way there. And give yourself kind of like this dotted line for reference sort of in the middle. So pause if you need to. Okay, so what we're going to do with this is look at what happens with this reaction. So we have A plus B kind of going along. And then in order for reaction to occur, it's not a great drawing. Try again. Right? What we're showing here, what we're trying to represent, is that energy of activation. So very often, chemical reactions require temperature as a factor that influences reaction rate. So very often increasing the temperature increases the rate of reaction. What this would say is, um, chemical reactions are typically getting A and B in close proximity to each other so that product AB forms, right? If you increase the temperature, you're moving those molecules around faster, they're more likely in contact with each other. The reaction happens faster. This is so great in the laboratory. This is so great in the kitchen. It's so not great in your cells. You can't heat up your cells in order for your reactions to occur in a timely fashion. Everything's gonna be damaged in that case, right? So temperature is a factor that influences reaction rate, but it's not a factor that fluctuates in the body very much. We also see another factor that influences is talking about concentration. So how much of those reactions reactants do you have? Makes sense. The more reactants, the more product. So if you increase your concentration, you typically increase your rate. Another factor that matters is the surface area of the molecule. Surface area is talking about how big that molecule is. If you have a really big molecule and you're trying to break it down into its little components, it's going to take longer than if you have a smaller object. So part of what we're doing, like in our digestion, it starts in our mouth, and part of that's mechanical, just like chopping up the food that we eat, trying to make the food material smaller. And then those molecules are actually getting ripped and torn as well. So making those smaller. And then the fourth factor that's involved here are enzymes. Enzymes we've mentioned, I think, real briefly before, and we're going to talk about them more in a later video. Enzymes can be described as catalysts. And what they actually do is they reduce the energy of activation. So in the graph, going back to the graph, we drew like it takes this much energy in order for A plus B to actually form into AB, a stable product. And in the lab, in the kitchen, you can speed that up with temperature. Maybe this reaction spontaneously occurs in the cell, but maybe it takes like 10 years. We can't wait 10 years for our reactions to occur, right? We need them to occur in a timely fashion. And this is where your enzymes come into play. So what your enzymes do is they bring A plus B closer to each other such that less energy is required to get you to the AB. So if we're doing A plus B, they fit in together in this enzyme in such a way that they can form this new bond more easily. If we're talking about a catabolic reaction, then maybe they fit in such a way that it sort of like stresses out the bond, making it easier to break. In some way, the enzyme is involved in making this reaction occur faster. The enzyme is not changed or used by being part of this reaction, so we'll typically write it over top of the arrow. So you might put your enzyme here. The thing that's super significant about these enzymes is that, basically you should consider in your body, in your cells, no reaction is taking place without an enzyme. And every reaction has its very own enzyme that catalyzes that reaction. Okay, so stay tuned to hear more. And in the meantime, take care of yourself and each other.